The fire came without warning, roaring across the edge of our pasture in a wave of heat and crackling fury. I was fixing a fence post when I smelled its bitter smoke that didn't belong on a spring morning. By the time I crested the ridge, flames were licking the tall grass along the property line. And there she was, Karen, the self-crowned queen of our HOA, standing smugly with a lighter dangling from her hand, flanked by two board members who looked more nervous than proud. Her voice carried across the field like the shriek of a crow. "This land is a hazard. If you won't clear it, the HOA will." I ran toward her, rage pulsing in my chest, but my wife, Sarah, was faster. She moved with the speed of someone who had lived her life in the line of fire. She seized the fire extinguisher from the ATV, sprinted into the blaze without hesitation, and cut a swath through the flames with practiced precision. Neighbors who had gathered gasped, some fumbling with phones, others running for water. Karen sneered, her arms crossed over her massive frame, satisfied like she had just saved the world instead of trying to burn it. "This is for everyone's safety," she bellowed, her smugness echoing against the hills. "Your land is a threat to property values. The HOA voted, and I'm enforcing it." I turned on her, my voice sharp enough to slice through her arrogance. "You set my pasture on fire. That's arson, Karen. Not a vote, not enforcement arson." The crowd murmured, whispers rising like a storm. She waved me off, her jowls quivering with self-importance. "Call it what you like. I call it leadership." What Karen didn't know, what no one in that crowd knew, was who my wife really was. Sarah had lived quietly since we moved back to the ranch, keeping her past folded away like an old uniform. But as the smoke swirled and neighbors gathered in shock, the truth began to crack through the surface. One of the younger deputies who arrived on scene froze mid-step when he saw her wrestle the flames down with calm control. His voice trembled with recognition. "Wait, are you Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reynolds?" The name carried across the cul-de-sac like a cannon shot. People turned, staring at my wife as if seeing her for the first time. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded once. And just like that, the story shifted. Because Sarah wasn't just my wife. She was the first female Navy SEAL to serve in combat operations, a pioneer whose name had been etched into military history before she ever thought of retiring to this quiet stretch of land. She had faced war zones Karen couldn't imagine, and now she stood on our scorched property with soot on her cheeks, more intimidating than any badge Karen could wave. The deputies moved quickly after that, extinguishing the last of the flames and taking statements. But Karen wasn't done. Her pride couldn't let her walk away. She shouted over the crowd, voice shrill and desperate. "She's dangerous. You're all blind. Do you want to kill her living next door? This is proof they don't belong here." Her words hung heavy in the air, but instead of support, they drew disgust. Neighbors who had once nodded politely at her now glared with open hostility. Then came the twist that made Karen's collapse inevitable. One of the board members who had come with her, a man named Gregory, stepped forward with shaking hands. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice cracking. "Karen ordered us to help her. She said if we burned the grass, the county would declare the land unsafe and seize it. She promised to split the profit with us after it was sold to developers." Gasps erupted. Phones captured every word. Karen shrieked, lunging at him, but the deputies held her back, cuffs ready. The image of my wife standing tall in the smoke, calm as steel, while Karen flailed and screamed, was one the neighborhood would never forget. And I knew right then, this wasn't just about saving our land. This was about exposing a tyrant. Karen didn't go quietly that night. Even as the deputies loaded her into the cruiser, she screamed like a cornered animal, swearing the neighborhood would regret turning against her. The cuffs clicked shut, and she shrieked about conspiracies and betrayals, spitting the words "illegal veterans" like it was some kind of insult. Neighbors who had trembled under her rule for years stood with arms crossed, shaking their heads. Some filmed every second, making sure the truth wouldn't be buried under her lies. And right there in the middle of it all stood Sarah, streaked with soot, her chest rising steady as if she were back on an op overseas, unmoved by the chaos swirling around her. The following week, the county courthouse was overflowing. Karen's arraignment had become a spectacle. Reporters filled the back rows, neighbors squeezed shoulder to shoulder, and for the first time in years, the community's eyes weren't clouded by Karen's intimidation. She was charged with arson, criminal mischief, conspiracy to commit fraud, and endangering public safety. But true to form, she strutted into court like she was the victim, her lawyer trailing behind like a whipped dog. Her defense was pathetic from the start. She claimed she'd lit the fire as a controlled burn to improve neighborhood safety, that the HOA had implied authority to manage neglected land. She even tried to twist Sarah's military background into a liability, painting her as a violent operator unfit to live in a civilian neighborhood. That line fell flat the moment Sarah walked to the stand. She didn't boast about her service. She didn't have to. She simply explained, in a voice calm enough to still the room, that she had sworn her life to protect people like Karen even when it cost her blood and bone. She described watching Karen ignite the flames, then described the faces of neighbors she pulled away from the smoke. Her testimony wasn't dramatic. It was raw, honest, and devastating. When she was done, even the judge sat straighter, as though reminded of the difference between real courage and hollow authority. But the twist that sealed Karen's fate came from Gregory, the board member who had cracked the night of the fire. He testified under oath that Karen had been in talks with a development company for months. She promised them the land would be vacated by force once she found a way to declare it unsafe. Burning the pasture wasn't negligence, it was strategy. She had planned to turn profit on scorched soil. That revelation landed like dynamite. Gasps rolled through the courtroom, phones lit up, reporters scribbled, and Karen's face twisted into something grotesque, caught between rage and terror. The prosecutor didn't even need closing theatrics. The evidence was stacked like bricks in a wall. Fraudulent bylaws, secret contracts, threats masked as citations. And now, an arson plot exposed by her own accomplice. When the gavel fell, Karen's empire of intimidation collapsed. Guilty on all counts. Her sentence: restitution to every family she'd defrauded, full removal from the HOA, years of probation, and, in cruel poetic justice, hundreds of hours of community service under county supervision. The woman who once fined children for sidewalk chalk would now spend her mornings picking up trash in the very park she claimed to protect. Outside the courthouse, neighbors gathered in a knot of relief and laughter. Some clapped Sarah on the back, others hugged Emily, who had stood terrified the night the fire broke out, but now looked at her mother with glowing pride. Mrs. Gutierrez, cane in hand, shook her head and said, "About time someone showed her what real leadership looks like." The cameras turned to Sarah, microphones shoved toward her, asking how it felt to take down the tyrant. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just said, this was never about us versus her. It was about truth versus fear. And truth won. The neighborhood changed after that. The new board dismantled Karen's bogus bylaws, scrapped the endless fines, and turned the HOA into what it should have been all along: a cooperative, not a dictatorship. Barbecues returned. Kids played without fear of citations. Laughter replaced the tension that once hung like a noose over every gathering. As for us, the pasture grew back. Green shoots pushed through the blackened soil, stubborn and alive, just like the people who lived there. On the gate, we hung a wooden board with Sarah's words painted across it. Our land, our fight. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. And so I ask you, after everything that happened, were we right to fight Karen the way we did? Should we have laughed off her tyranny or met it head on, even when it meant standing in a courtroom to face her? Share your thoughts, because what's right and wrong in battles like these shapes not just one family, but entire communities.